Addiction doesn't always announce itself loudly. It slips in quietly, almost unnoticed at first. It is not necessarily a needle or a glass. Sometimes it is your 10th mindless swipe through social media. Sometimes it is needing constant validation just to feel stable. Sometimes it is one more episode turning into an entire series overnight. It feels you realize you're no longer seeking pleasure. You're running from pain. The frightening truth is that most people never identify where T-hat pain originates. When Swiss psychologist Carl Jung approached addiction treatment, he didn't begin with withdrawal protocols or behavioral modification. He started by examining the soul itself. For Jung, addiction was never the core issue. It was merely a signal pointing towards something deeper. We exist in an era simultaneously starved of dopamine, yet obsessed with constant stimulation. Our minds perpetually seek relief while trapped in repetitive cycles. Dopamine, that neurochemical linked to drive and satisfaction, becomes increasingly depleted. This happens not simply because of our actions, but because we've lost touch with fundamental aspects of ourselves. Jung described this as separation from the authentic self, not your social identity or professional role, but your truest essence, the integrated core of your being that connects to meaning, purpose, and creative expression. From Jung's perspective, addiction represents spiritual hunger, an urgent message from the unconscious mind, not merely seeking temporary relief, but searching for completeness. He famously stated that all addiction is destructive, whether the substance is alcohol, morphine, or even idealism. His point was clear: the problem isn't the external object, it is the internal void. This is precisely where conventional addiction treatment often misses the mark. We address behaviors while ignoring the person beneath them. We apply temporary fixes while the foundation continues crumbling. Jung understood that genuine transformation only occurs when we courageously examine our interior landscape, those shadow aspects we've buried, the parts we condemn, the parts we fear, the parts desperately needing acknowledgement rather than suppression. If this feels daunting, understand you're not alone, because here is what matters. The shadow isn't inherently negative. It is simply repressed psychological energy, and paradoxically, that is exactly where healing potential resides. But here is what makes Jung's work remarkable. He didn't just offer theories, he provided a roadmap, a comprehensive psychological and spiritual framework for reintegrating what is being fragmented. Methods that illuminate why dopamine depletion occurs initially and how to establish a lifestyle that naturally restores it, not through pleasure seeking, but through purpose alignment. We'll explore these methods, practical approaches, spiritual practices and techniques you can implement immediately. Stay with this video, because what you'll uncover isn't simply addiction treatment. It is understanding the part of yourself that has been communicating through these patterns all along. Before continuing, if you're passionate about expanding consciousness and exploring life's deeper dimensions, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom so you never miss this inward journey. If addiction is symptomatic rather than causal, what lies beneath? Let's examine dopamine, not as trendy terminology, but as a biological messenger. Dopamine transcends simple pleasure. It drives every action that makes existence feel meaningful. It represents motivation, expectation, and fulfillment. The notification sound, the first taste of something delicious, the heartwarming message from someone who cares. When dopamine levels drop, life becomes colorless, uninspiring, and empty. That is when compulsion emerges. But dopamine depletion doesn't originate with streaming services or comfort food. It typically begins much earlier. It starts with emotional repression, with circumstances where authenticity carried consequence, where perhaps you needed to be compliant or resilient or responsible. You learned to suppress your needs for survival, and through that suppression, you disconnected from your authentic self. Jung termed this psychic fragmentation. It occurs when you bury unwelcome aspects of yourself and construct a facade instead. How does the brain respond to chronic disconnection? It desperately seeks relief. Some pursue it through substances, others through relationships or digital escape. But the specific outlet isn't the issue. It is the feeling they're attempting to recreate, a glimpse of significance, a momentary sense of adequacy. Now we're trapped, not in addiction itself, but in a cycle. Internal emptiness triggers dopamine depletion, leading to escape behaviors, followed by shame, creating more emptiness. Carl Jung recognized that breaking this cycle isn't about willpower, it is about integration. He wrote that enlightenment comes not from imagining light, but from making darkness conscious. This means facing your pain rather than avoiding it. It means questioning what suffering this addiction attempts to numb, and which parts of yourself you've abandoned to cope. This distinguishes Jung's methodology from traditional models fundamentally. He didn't merely want sobriety, he wanted wholeness. And wholeness begins with awareness, with recognizing patterns not as personal failures but as clues, signals from your unconscious guiding you toward yourself. This explains why Jung considered dreams sacred and why symbols and archetypes mattered profoundly. They were communications from forgotten aspects of ourselves, the inner child, the rebel, the healer, the wounded one, all still present within you. Until we acknowledge them, we'll continue seeking completion through things never designed to fulfill us. But there is encouraging news. The moment you stop viewing addiction as personal failure and start recognizing it as communication, that is when healing begins. Addiction isn't your identity, it is a protective mechanism your psyche developed to shield you from unprocessed pain. But now you're prepared, you're curious, and that changes everything. Let's examine 3 apro aches: practical, spiritual, and soul nurturing, that facilitate connection with your deeper self and reveal what truly underlies compulsive patterns. These aren't about battling addiction, they're about listening to its message. First approach, shadow work. Jung's most transformative concept was the shadow, the hidden psychological territory where we store everything we've rejected, denied, or judged about ourselves. The anger, grief, envy, fear, even desires for power, love, or recognition. These aspects don't vanish, they go underground, manifesting through our addictions, projections, and behavioral patterns. Shadow work involves making the unconscious conscious. It is confronting yourself and asking what parts you've imprisoned because you deemed them unacceptable. What truth are you avoiding yet desperately need to face? Begin shadow work through journaling. Try asking if my addiction could speak. What would it tell me? Write without judgment and let it express itself. You may discover surprising truths waiting just below awareness. Second approach, breathwork. While Jung never taught breathwork, if he were alive today, he might recognize it as one of the most direct methods for accessing the unconscious through embodied experience. Breathwork involves using conscious, rhythmic breathing to bypass analytical thinking and access stored emotional energy. Breath is uniquely both automatic and controllable, functioning as a gateway to the unconscious. When you breathe consciously, particularly in connected or circular patterns, you signal your nervous system that safety exists and release is possible. What frequently emerges is the discharge of buried emotions, unresolved trauma, or long-forgotten memories. Some people weep, others laugh. Some experience physical shaking. Some achieve unprecedented clarity. This transcends emotional catharsis. It is psychological integration. You're clearing energetic blockages that addiction attempted to suppress. Addiction numbs while breathwork reveals. Even a single session can illuminate that what you craved wasn't a substance. It was reconnection with yourself. Third approach, symbolic ritual as soul dialogue. Jung frequently stated that the soul communicates through imagery. T.H. explains why symbols, dreams, and rituals carry such potency. They circumvent intellect and speak directly to the unconscious. When trapped in addiction, it is not just habits that become misaligned. Often our inner world has been silenced or dismissed. Ritual becomes a method for reopening that conversation. We're not discussing empty ceremony. We're discussing conscious acts of connection. Here is a powerful symbolic ritual to try. Find quiet space and light a candle. Fire represents timeless purification. Sit with a mirror and meet your own gaze, not to judge or criticize, but to witness. Speak aloud. I recognize I've been escaping something. I don't fully comprehend it yet, but I'm present now, ready to listen. Write a letter to your addicted part, not to shame it, but to understand it, fold it, and place it beneath the candle. Let it burn for 15 minutes while you breathe and remain present. This is less about fixing and more about reconnecting. You're communicating to your deeper self. You're no longer alone. Now that we've examined symptoms, encountered the shadow, and begun reconnection work, it is time for genuine alchemy, transformation, because healing addiction isn't merely breaking habits. It is becoming someone new, or rather, someone more authentic. It is answering the call that addiction was attempting to silence. This is the path Jung called individuation, the journey toward wholeness, not perfection or but integration. Most people believe healing means returning to their pre-addiction self. But Jung would tell you that version was already fragmented, already disconnected, already suffering. The goal isn't regression. It is progression through transformation into the version of yourself that addiction was pointing toward. The version who feels complete without needing escape. Let's discuss what this looks like practically. First step, create a life that nourishes your soul, not just fills your calendar. Jung believed most psychological distress stemmed from unlived lives. This includes draining work, numbing relationships, routines that leave your spirit unexpressed. You don't heal in isolation. You heal in environments reflecting your truth. Ask yourself, what in my life feeds addiction and what feeds authenticity? Start small, one daily choice, one honest conversation, one creative outlet, one honored boundary. These aren't merely disciplined acts, they're acts of soul. Second step, let meaning replace stimulation. Addiction flourishes in overstimulated yet underconnected lives. We scroll instead of conversing, binge instead of reflecting, consume instead of creating. Rather than asking how to stop the habit, ask what this craving seeks emotionally and spiritually. Replace dopamine loops with meaning loops, creating art without judgment, sitting with silence and exploring feelings, reading material that stirs rather than merely entertains, spending time with people who hold space beyond superficial conversation. When your life welcomes your authentic self, addiction loses its hold. Third step, view relapse, not failure. Jung was explicit. Healing isn't linear. The unconscious doesn't move in straight lines. It spirals, circles, repeats patterns until truly integrated. Relapse, if it occurs, isn't shameful. It is information. Your psyche saying you missed something, you missed something. Let's examine again. You're not back at the beginning. You're on a deeper spiral layer. And this time you have tools, awareness, language, community, compassion. The real miracle occurs when addiction becomes the catalyst for self-discovery. When what once broke you becomes the doorway to liberation. Because that is individuation, not self-improvement or recovery, but reclamation. The return of all lost parts, the shadow, the child, the artist, the dreamer, the spiritual seeker, woven into one radiant, coherent existence. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. This is your return beginning. If this journey resonates with you, even quietly, comment below, I'm coming home. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom for videos that transcend surface level and reach straight into the soul. You are not broken. You are becoming. Your authentic self is waiting.